Hey guys, what's going on? It's May. I wanted to make a short little review on the film 2009 from Rocketman, uh, about the life of Elton John. Yeah, this film was pretty good. It was better than I expected. It starts off with Elton John going into this rehab where he has this really outlandish type outfit, and it's just really showing was how Elton is a very ostentatious person, but in the 70s, when he was at his height, he was at his apex of fame, he was even more ostentatious, more out there. And he's going into this rehab and he's talking about how he's a shopaholic, how he's a alcoholic, how he's addicted to sex, he's addicted to drugs, he's just a complete mess. And these other people are hearing his life story. So then the audience is treated to his early life. When he was born, Reginald Dwight. I thought that was a really weird name because that it really has nothing to do with what his name later became, Elton John. But you would show that they initially had a really strong love for music. There's a scene in there when his grandma and his mom are sitting in the kitchen and he gets on the piano and everyone is ecstatic that he knows how to. He's such at a young age. He knows how to play uh, music. You're like, wow, he's really talented. But he tries to connect to his father on a really musical type level. But his father tells him, don't even excuse me, touch my records. Don't even come near my stuff. He doesn't let Elton express himself musically, and the mother doesn't really believe that it's anything worth pursuing either because there's this one scene when he's in his bed looking at his sheet music for the piano, and he imagines himself being a classical music conductor. And his mom's like, turn off the light, go to sleep, it's getting late. you know, Stop with your nonsense. Until his piano teacher, with the urging of his grandma, he takes piano. And the piano teacher says he has the skills to play at the London Symphony Orchestra. And, he goes there, but he doesn't, classical music doesn't really connect with him. It's not till he ironically catches his, his mom cheating with her boyfriend, who's I guess, a rockabilly type. He's dressed like Elvis, where Elton discovers his true passion, which is rock and roll. But one scene that you really get the gist of where Elton's personal problems stem from is the scene where he sings "I Want Love." He never really got the love from his parents, so he found the love his love in music. But anyway, his mother's boyfriend introduces him to rock and roll. He introduces him to Elvis Presley. Now, rock and roll was already at this time the most popular music in the world, but young British kids and teens like Elton, they were first being exposed to it. And they were being exposed to a lot more of it than here in the United States because Britain didn't have really the um, the racial hangups that the United States had. So people like Elton John were free to pursue predominantly black genres of music such as soul and rock and roll more than white American white American teens. And then that's even shown in the in the next scene where he's shown performing with a young Chuck Berry and other African American rock and rollers, and that's when Chuck Berry, well, the person who's supposed to be Chuck Berry anyway, in the movie tells him, "Listen, you got to have a different name. Reginald Dwight is just not gonna cut it in showbiz." So he chooses the name Elton John under the inspiration of the Beatles' John Lennon, and he finally meets up with Bernie, his songwriter, and immediately he falls in love with this this man. But unfortunately, the man doesn't feel the same way about Elton. Elton's feelings are unrequited because this man is straight. But Elton himself tries to pretend that he is straight and even has an affair with his landlady. But when his landlady finds out that he's gay, she throws him out and he has nowhere to go. And he finally has to go back to his mom's. And when he goes back to his mom's, he tries to make a move on this his his songwriting partner. He goes in to kiss him, and the songwriter partner basically friend zones him by saying, "I love you, Elton, but I don't love you in that way." You know. So in other words, I love you as just a friend because I'm straight and I never feel that way about another man. And Elton is you can see that Elton is hurt by this because there's a scene in his mom's house where he starts to play our song, and our song is a very famous song that became famous and special, at least in my life, because of the movie Moulin Rouge. But he's singing this song to this guy Bernie, and there's a lot of pain in him because, like I said, early on in his life, he didn't really feel loved by his parents. He didn't feel loved by his dad. He didn't feel loved by his mother. Only his grandma really was the only one who truly loves him. So he kind of fell in love with this guy, but not really. So he and the guy go to America at this club called the Troubadour. And it's at this club that this guy meets later. Then the guy Bernie meets a very young, attractive woman, and of course Elton he becomes jealous, and his jealousy is the inspiration for the song "Tiny Dancer" because he's a dancer at the club. But at this club, he initially he's nervous, but he goes up there and he kills it with Crocodile Rock. And one scene that I love that I joke with my girlfriend Lisa about was that this shows Elton John levitating as he's playing the piano, playing Crocodile Rock, and I was like, that's where all the special effects budget went, because the entire crowd is levitating during the scene. And what's the significance of showing something like this? The significance of it is it's a landmark moment in Elton's life because much like Ray Charles in the movie Ray, the first time he got on stage, this was the first time that Elton John had gotten high and he had experienced drugs. And it was the drugs that put his mind at ease. So as he's levitating, it's showing you the effects of drug use. And that becomes a significant scene later on as he becomes more famous and he meets the man John, who is his manager, and eventually the man he falls in love with and is seduced by. Now, keep in mind, Elton John is at this point, he's a very naive young man. He's just breaking into the music business, and he's never experienced a love affair before. And he experiences this love affair with this very slick talking young record executive who's basically out to use him for his talent. And now they show a gay sex scene, which is one of the first homosexual sex scenes ever in any movie. You know, Brokeback Mountain kind of showed it, but they showed it in the tent. They didn't really show it. This one didn't either, but it showed more than any other movie, put it that way. So much so that the film got banned in several um, conservative Christian and Muslim countries uh, like American Samoa. I mean not American Samoa, the country of Samoa and Egypt. They wouldn't show this film because of the gay sex scene. But Elton gets seduced by this man, and much like other biopics, like about Ray Charles or about NWA or about um, Tupac or Hector Lavoe or any of the other musical artists. They started to show how Elton became really successful and became basically the top selling artist of the 1970s. And they show the information behind several of his songs. But he becomes so successful during the time that he's struggling with doing all these drugs. He's basically drinking all day, doing cocaine all day, smoking weed all day. And what's the impetus for this? You would think here's this man who he has it all. Yes, he's the top selling artist of the 19 of his generation, his decade, the 70s, and he he's doing this drugs. Well, it shows the scene And when he becomes successful, he goes back to his father, and he finds out that his father had other children, another another woman. And not only did he have other children with this other woman, but Elton invites his father and his half brothers to a show, and the father doesn't want to go. And he says, "Could you sign this record for me?" And he says, "Sure, make it out to dad." And he starts to write it, and the dad says, "No, make it out to one of my coworkers." In other words, even even as the top selling artist in the world at the time, Elton couldn't even get his father's love. Now, as I was reading on this film, I found out that his half brother actually sued him, Jeff Dwight, for defamation of character towards the father. That the father was portrayed as unloving, cold, callous, so much like other types of movies like this. Somebody has to interject uh, their opinion and say, well, it wasn't really like that. The father he loved Elton. He tried to reach out to Elton later in life. But keep in mind, this film is from the perspective of Elton John, not the perspective of Elton John's father. So, as it goes on, Elton then finds himself still frustrated, still aggravated with his relationship with his business manager. Because keep in mind, guys, this is the 70s, and the LGBT movement was in its infancy. Stonewall, it only happened in 1969, and most of the film takes place in 1972. That's only 3 years removed from. So people wanted to keep this a secret, and so did his lover. He would constantly cheat on Elton, and from what the one scene, Elton is coming out from his drunken stupor, and he sees his boyfriend receiving oral sex from this other person at the whole house, and he says, "You know what? I'm throwing you out. Get the fuck out of my house. I don't want to see you anymore. I don't want anything to do with you." And then Elton overdoses on drugs, and he feels like he says, "For my last and final stunt, I'm going to kill myself." And he's on pills, he's on cocaine, he's on alcohol, and he jumps into the pool and he starts to drown. That's when he sees his little self as singing the song Rocketman. Now, one thing I found interesting is in the original song for Rocketman, he says, "The earth's so cold, I miss my wife." But obviously, that was before he was out, and he was kind of an in the closet gay man. So now that he's out now, they changed it to it. Uh, You're so cold, I miss my life. So he goes to rehab, gets better, but then he constantly battles with drug addiction until like 1984 when he gets he has to actually cancel his Madison Square Garden show because he almost died. But it's showing you that in the music business, whether or not you're involved with someone romantically, a lot of times you're just a cash cow to them. They showed this in Bohemian Rhapsody. They showed this in the TLC movie On the TLC Tip. They showed this in Straight Outta Compton. They showed this here. that it doesn't really matter to your handlers what happens to you. Only thing that matters is the music for them. And the poignant scene was Elton John's mom and his stepfather are sitting down to watch Liberace perform. Now, Liberace was also a very flamboyant uh, musician from back in the day that was gay, closeted gay man, and like Elton, like Freddie Mercury, was one of the few around at that time. And but anyway, he tells his mom that he's he's gay. He says I'm homosexual, and she says, "Why do you do this? You know, you'll never be loved properly because she felt that being gay was wrong." And several times in the film, she expressed to him why she felt she was ashamed of himself. This kind of really reminded me of Bohemian Rhapsody. Freddie Mercury's father felt the same way. Him not only being a musician, coming from a working class background, but also being gay at a time when you really weren't gay, when it was a really taboo thing to be gay. But then Elton eventually quits drugs, and he sings the song "I Am Still Standing," which is the last song he does. He's dressed up as Jackie Robinson in the Dodgers outfit in New York City, and he performs. And he sees his mom and his grandmother there. He also has a scene where he's making out with a bunch of these dudes. But it's really a story about him coming to terms with who he is and why the song Rocketman is so poignant is because, like a rocket man in space, Elton John felt like he was so alone. He felt like he couldn't really tell anyone about how he truly felt. Of course, being out later, he would later become a better songwriter. He would write a song about Marilyn Monroe, Candle in the Wind, and a lot of the stuff that Marilyn Monroe went through was kind of stuff he kind of went through too. And a lot of the stuff, and he would write the song Daniel. Now, there's a scene in the movie where he is going to the guy that would eventually become his manager, and he sings the song Daniel. Now, this didn't really happen because Daniel wasn't recorded until that young fan Daniel, for who the song is named after, died of HIV, and Elton dedicated the song to him. So it was impossible for him to ever perform that song Daniel for that guy. But you know, like in all biopics, they jump around here, they jump around there. But um, yeah, I love a lot of his songs. I love Tiny Dancer, and I was joking with Lisa that on Friends, Lisa Kudrow's character Phoebe says um, she mistakes the lyric Tiny Dancer for Tony Danza, and that's still a common mistake that a lot of people make. Elton John, if I could compare him to anybody today, I would compare him to Ed Sheeran. Because like Ed Sheeran, he sings those kinds of songs that really touch you. And of course, people from my generation know him because he composed the score of The Lion King, one of the greatest movies ever made. But There were so many songs in this movie that I liked that I didn't even know were performed by him. Like "Don't Go Breaking My Heart." These songs on the radio constantly on the contemporary stations or oldies stations. And sometimes your parents or grandparents, at least in my case, would play these songs, and you'd be like, "God, I like these songs," but you didn't know they were done by the same guy who did the Lion King. You know. But it was nice to see a biopic of a movie of a person that's still alive and not somebody who's dead. You know, we always talked about in history class primary source material and secondary source material, and this was primary source material because of him still alive to tell his story. He meant it be, of course, people are going to have discrepancies about it, like, oh, it really didn't go down that way. It was different, but he told it from his point of view. And that was what was important. And he was a famous advocate for LGBT rights and representation in music. And he was helping, you know. Other than Billy Joel, was probably the greatest singer-songwriter in the history of music. You know, he did. He did perform Benny and the Jets on Soul Train in the '70s, so he had that kind of crossover, re-crossover audience as he's a white performer and he reached a black, musical charts because he had a lot of soul. Benny and Jets is one of my favorite songs. But yeah, I give the actor who portrayed him. I believe his name is Taron Edgerton. I'm sorry, I didn't look his name up. Taron Edgerton. Um, a lot of props. He was given the job because he performed "I'm Still Standing" in the 2016 animated film Sing, and he sounds a lot like Elton. So I give him a lot of props. I think the music was great. Like I said, I love Elton John. Whenever Tiny Dancer comes on, I sing that shit. Because it reminds me of the movie Almost Famous. When they're in the back of the bus, like, uh, Eugene, baby, ballet, lady, seem to fall the band. You know, that shit was really beautiful. I wanted to sing along with a lot of other stuff, but I was really sad and I didn't want to feel embarrassed. I kept just forgetting, but love Elton John. Like when he performed in 2002 at the Grammys with Eminem, and they each had their core audiences that were mad at them. LGBT people, of course, being mad at Eminem because he said, "Do I hate fags?" The answer is yes. And Elton, the top star of the '70s and the top star of the 2000s, coming together on a Grammy stage. Phenomenal. But this movie was probably one of the best uh, biographical films that I've seen thus far. not on the level with Bohemian Rhapsody, because Bohemian Rhapsody, although it mentioned that Freddie Mercury was gay and that Freddie Mercury, died from AIDS, like I said, Freddie Mercury was already dead, so you can only get secondhand accounts from it. Unlike Elton, who was still alive. So, Rocketman was a good movie, and it was not a movie about South Korean and North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un, despite what President Donald Trump might say. But peace, I enjoyed it. Taron Egerton.